Today's reading with talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. Devotee asks, can samadhi come and go? And the Maharshi says, what is samadhi? Samadhi is one's essential nature. How then can it come or go? If you do not realize your essential nature, your sight remains obstructed. What is the obstruction? Find it and remove it. So one's efforts are meant only for the removal of obstructions which hide the true vision. The real nature remains the same. When once it is realized, it is permanent. The devotee says, but Mr. Brunton, another devotee, says that he had 1 hour's samadhi. Therefore I asked the question. And the Maharshi says, a practicer gains peace of mind and is happy. That peace is the result of effort. But the real state must be effortless. The effortless samadhi is the true one and the perfect state, and it is permanent. The efforts are spasmodic, and so also their results. When the real, effortless, permanent, happy nature is realized, it will be found to be not inconsistent with the ordinary activities of life. The samadhi reached after efforts looks like abstraction from the external activities, and a person might be so abstracted or live freely among people without detriment to peace and happiness, because that is true nature, or the self. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Welcome. So I chose this reading this week because there still is sometimes some confusion about whether effort is required or not, and whether the recognition of the truth of your own being is permanent or not. So I wanted to have this reading just to remind you all that you always are that which is aware. And there can be still, sometimes, this experience of the recognition of who you are coming and going, so that you seem to slip back and forth in between what you know to be your own nature as peace, as consciousness, as bliss, and the rising of certain challenges that maybe you've had for a long time in your life. When these challenges arise, then it becomes necessary for us to apply the effort that we've been talking about for the last year or so here, in order to stabilize in being, consciousness, and bliss once again. But as Sri Ramana indicates here, this effort is also a temporary situation. And though it may go on for you for a long time, you may need to exert some effort from time to time when you feel that you aren't able to contact your true nature at a given moment, or you feel that it slipped away due to some circumstance or some arising difficulty in your life. Then Sri Ramana indicates that while the self is untouched by this activity that goes on in the mind, body, and world, or in the emotions, the inquiry is designed as a tool so that you can return as quickly as possible, which may feel quick and it may not feel quick. It may feel like it takes you a few hours or days to return to the peace and stability of your own nature. And that's where our effort is applied, and that's what the inquiry is for. But he wants to also make it clear to us all, and he does this frequently, and I hope I do this frequently for you, is to remind you that you are always that. You are always the awareness, which is prior to whatever is arising in body, mind, and world. And it's this reminder that eventually will become your own voice, so that when you feel like you've slipped or you've somehow drifted away from your recognition of yourself as the self, as being consciousness and bliss, you will hear your own voice, or my voice, or Sri Ramana's voice, saying, but you are always that. You are never what is passing by in body, mind, or world. All of those experiences are impermanent. You are unborn, undying, consciousness itself. And so I will persist in saying this to you until you are able to persist yourself. Then you have no more need of this. So, we're down to our last couple of hours before I begin my winter travels this year. So, if there's anything that you have, there'll be one more satsang next Sunday. But some of you I already know won't be able to be here. So, if there's anything at all that you have that you'd like to bring up or clear up or have me speak about one more time, now is the time for you to do that.
Would you be willing to speak about your work in India? What calls you there and what people you work with?
They're people just like you. They just happen to be on that side of the world. So, yeah, I don't know what to say about that. What calls me there? Nothing. I just do satsang all the time, I do satsang every day, but with one person or another, or with a group of people. And so this just moves from here to there. So nothing changes really. I do enjoy going to India, that's part of it. There's no reason to go other than to enjoy it. I enjoy being there in the winter. I like the warm weather. It's pretty simple and straightforward. But also it is true that, it's becoming harder and harder for people to move around the world in some ways because of the conditions in the world right now. So in some ways it's also just easier for me to go there and meet with people rather than some people have already in this past year tried to come here and are experiencing some difficulty with either their government or our government. Governments are in turmoil right now. So this is just a reality of the situation that we're in right now. So, yeah, it's just easier for one person to get a visa and go meet the 80 or 90 people that are there than it is to have those people try to get visas and come here. Some of them simply can't. Some of you know there's a group of people that I respond to who are from Russia. And so it's just easier for them. They cannot necessarily get into this country at the moment. And so it's just easier for me to go there and to meet them as they come from Russia.
Will you have the technology there to post the videos of some satsangs?
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be doing that sometime in the latter part of December. We're not actually planning to do satsang until January this year, but I'm taking the camera equipment, and so yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do. I'd like to do this year is just to do some filming around Arunachala for you all, so you can have the experience of what it's like to be there in some way. Some of the temples and so on. So hopefully Anandi will be there to do some videotaping, and of course she'll be uploading to YouTube as we're doing and to Facebook as we're doing the satsangs there. And one of the things that we're hopefully going to work out this year, she's working on it already, one of the things we're hopefully going to work out is the ability to use a computer to live stream this year, so that it would be possible for you or anyone else in the world to join in live with the satsangs, which is like the next level up from doing the satsangs on camera and then uploading them to YouTube, rather to do them spontaneously like this. And what that will allow us to do is either that you could either through voice or through text, you could ask a question or make a comment, and it would show up on the computer screen for me to read, and or it would come through as a voice for everyone to hear. And then we'd be able to do the satsangs continuously from wherever we are in the world. So that's kind of where we're headed at this moment. And you'd be able to check in. Of course, some of you might have to stay up till midnight to hear a satsang from India, but you might be willing to do it. Or 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that.
When feelings of meaninglessness arise, is that a sign of progress or slipping back into the mind?
So, when you have a feeling of meaninglessness, who is having that feeling? Can you find the one who's having that feeling?
No.
You can't.
No.
So then can you say, are you having that feeling right now?
No, but I've noticed it's been, I'm going through periods where it comes and goes.
Yeah, yeah. So have you been able to see what thoughts that's related to, this feeling of meaninglessness? By that I mean feeling, when we talk about feeling, is normally we experience it as a sensation or some sort in the body, right? That's why we call it a feeling. But what we often don't notice is that the feeling is precipitated by a thought.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if you just think back
Mm-hmm.
in your memory to when you have one of these events where you feel this sense of meaninglessness, have you started to notice, or can you notice that there's a pattern in that, in the thinking that is associated with that feeling?
I think that would be the thing for me to start looking for.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And so it's important to understand this notion that every feeling that we experience in the body, in the mind, and so on, is always precipitated by a thought. But the thought is often unconscious, which is why what we experience first is the feeling. So at that point, we have to stop the outward flow of our attention, because the attention is actually outward into the feeling itself, and then we're searching around in the dialogue in the mind that says, should I be feeling this way? Should I not be feeling this way? Is this an indication of progress, or is this an indication of sliding back, right? That's the outward flow of that energy, right? From body into mind, and then that into that whole dialogue. But if we're going to discover and uproot that feeling, what the cause of that is, we have to ask the question, where is this rising from? Who is having this feeling? These are the same question. They are the same question. We can either ask the question, who is thinking this thought? Who is feeling this feeling, right? We can do it like that. Or we can say, where is this coming from? And both of those questions, any form of that question, will turn our attention back into the rising of the feeling itself, and then into the thought which is prior to. So it gives us the opportunity to bring up into conscious awareness what is rising, even though it remains unconscious for us. By turning attention back to it, it rises into consciousness. Now we can see it, we can see the root of the feeling, and we can just drop it. We can say, then we'll know for ourselves, right? Is this rising because I'm slipping back, or is it rising because I'm progressing? The answer, I will give you a hint, is that you're progressing as soon as you turn back toward the feeling and say, who is thinking this thought? Where is this coming from? How is this rising? Who is this rising to? Any form of that question takes you back into this present moment, here now awareness, and brings whatever is unconscious into conscious awareness. This is progress. That's the definition of progress in this way. If, in fact, you end up feeling the feeling, becoming disturbed by the feeling, reacting to the feeling, and asking the question, am I slipping backwards? Then the answer is also yes. Right? But it's not because you're actually falling backwards. It's because you're pursuing the false nature of thought itself. Right? Okay. So the choice is yours. Turn back toward the source of the thought or the feeling, or turn outward. So you contain every potential, right? So you have the potential both for slipping back into your conditioned responses, or you possess the choice to turn away from the conditioned responses and into the source of being. This is our practice. This is the place that Sri Raman is talking about here when he says at certain times we need to apply effort. Until we recognize that awareness itself, consciousness itself, natural being, sahaj samadhi, this is no effort. This is effortless. This is the indicator that we've moved from identifying with conditioning and identifying with conditions and identifying with thoughts and feelings and emotions. And now we're identified with awareness itself or consciousness itself. Is that we move into an effortless state where there's the singular recognition that we are happiness.
Sign me up.
Yeah. Keep coming back to the understanding. Anytime this sense of what did you call it?
Meaningless?
Meaninglessness?
Yeah.
So anytime this rises and you just return to the recognition that you have a choice and start the process that Sri Raman is talking about and that I'm talking about.
I would just like to share, if it's of any value, I hope it is. I went through a long period of time of meaninglessness, and that was when I was very involved in inner healing and inner work. And because I had nothing in the outer to show anyone, anything.
Okay.
And so for me, who likes to be productive and do things and all of that, it was quite something, and it was quite intense. And you know, it was like over all this extended period of time when I had nothing to show the world, anything. All they got was whatever they felt or perceived when they see me, my energy. That was it. So I finally just came to be at peace with that. And I just saw it as a phase. It was an intense phase. It was a prolonged phase. And then things shift and change, and I just accepted. I have nothing to show the world anything.
Yes.
I don't have any to suit any of these conditionings in the outer world. And, you know, it went on. And I didn't have anyone sitting in front of me to tell me what you just did. But I just, I considered it a phase in my path and awakening. But I just wanted to share that if it's of any
Thank you.
help
Thank you. It's
or
very helpful.
value.
I know. That's why I'm looking at you.
Yeah. Earlier you asked her the question, can you find the one who feels this? And she said no. And I thought, if I'm feeling something, whatever it is, I can find who that is that's feeling it. It's a sensation. It's an emotion. It's something that's tangible in a sense. And the same thing. It's thought. It's emotion. It's feeling. It's body sensation. I can find that.
Yeah,
So,
you can find, there's no doubt you can find sensation, you can find thought, but does this amount to an I? That's the question I was asking her. Does this amount to who you are?
amount to an I. Well, there is something that is feeling something. There's something that is thinking something.
What is that? Look.
It's a thought.
Yes.
It's a feeling.
Yes.
It's a body sensation.
Yes.
And I call that me.
Yes. You call that me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is the path to suffering. Very clear. disputing that thought arises. We're not disputing that there is sensation in the body. We're not disputing that there is experience in the world. We're not disputing any of that. We're actually acknowledging all of that. We're saying, yes, that's absolutely true. Also saying, what does that have to do with me? You see, if there's a me involved in all of that, then this is the way and the root of suffering.
I get that sometimes, but
So-
at this particular
So
moment.
let, so
I'm
let me,
not
yeah, so
getting
let
it.
me finish you.
Okay.
So, what is before that identification with body, sensation, thought?
There's an awareness of the body, sensation, thought, and
This is the
emotion.
path to liberation. You see, this is not really complicated.
It's not, but it seems like it is.
Yes, but understand that this is the path. This is the why we call it conditioning, is
Yeah,
because it seems
exactly.
like it's really complicated.
It does. Sometimes I feel like I have to twist my brain around to. It's like I have to do this whole thing.
Yes, and there's no doubt about that. There is no doubt about that. This is the way, what I was describing to her, is that you do, and this is what Sri Ramana is saying, that there are moments when you must apply effort. And that, the way you describe it, the way in which you must sort of feel like you're twisting yourself around into some sort of a pretzel.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is absolutely the place where effort is being applied. What is the effort and what's it being applied toward? The effort is the turning of energy away from the conditioning and toward the unconditioned, right? And what that can do for you is cause this sense of recognition that awareness is here in its simplest form. Awareness is here, right? And that I don't need to identify with the me-ness of body, mind, or world, sensation, or thought, in order to know that awareness is here. So awareness is free of that. It's here already, right? It's here in this moment. Are you experiencing that? So now be willing to give up the struggle in the mind that says I have to twist myself into a pretzel in order to know that. It's simpler than that. In fact, the mind saying, I have to turn myself into a pretzel in order to see this, in order to know what he's talking about, in order to make this effort, that is what is called the veiling quality of mind, based on conditioning.
So we're just talking about being present.
Exactly.
I just, I get lost
And
sometimes.
being present, or being presence,
Yeah.
which is actually being present without the indicator me, this is called presence. If you eliminate present, in other words, presence is acknowledged, but being present requires a me, and I don't need the me. So there's not a me who has to be present. There's just this recognition of presence or awareness itself, right? Which is awareness in its simplest form. We feel it as presence, as the recognition I am here, right? So this is just the same thing that we were talking about before, but without the me. So if we drop me,
Yeah.
right?
I think maybe just being with the body, just feeling the body.
That won't do it. That won't undercut it. It just won't. You can be with the body, but there'll always be this present that requires there to be a me in order to attend to the body. What we're talking about now is before that. Now, the body, let me say, is a wonderful anchor for when the mind has become disturbed in some way, identified with something, right? This is why all of the practices in yoga and Vedanta and Buddhism all have mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of sensation, right? Attention toward the center of, the felt center of being in the body itself, right? All of these things are there, but they're preliminary, they're anchors for the awareness or the consciousness or the thought process which is trying to move out and identify with the body, mind, or world as itself. So we use these methods, right, of returning to sensation, of returning to breath, of returning before, in order to stabilize. But it's not just to stabilize there with the belief or the identity I am the body, or with the belief or the identity I am the mind. It's to go before that and say, okay, I am stable, I recognize I am here, right? Presence. I know that I am present. What's before that? So understand that we're talking about steps along a return here, so that we don't get stuck in places like, what was your word? I can't even give it a name. Meaninglessness. Because these states of not knowing, right, which is really what she's describing, meaninglessness, she's using that word because that has some value for her, it's an indicator, a pointer, right? But she could also just say, there's just nothingness here, and I don't know what to do with it. When there's nothingness present, or the recognition, I am nothing, and I'm not identified with the body and the mind, right? That's implied in I am nothing, is that I don't take myself to be the body, I don't take myself to be the mind, the thought, the sensation, right? I don't take myself, I don't identify with any of those attributes of experience. So now, I'm just nothing. And then people start to describe their experience as meaningless or purposeless, things like this. These are the terms that people tend to use. And this is because of what you were talking about, how mind will define itself by the way that the world responds or reacts to the outward manifestation. That's what she's talking about. Right? And so in every one of these cases, we're talking about the same thing. And this is the process of return beyond the sense of me-ness of body, sensation, thought, thinking, to what is prior to that. And then beginning to find our, for lack of a better word, beginning to find our sense of identification, not in the world, or in the nothingness, or the meaninglessness, but in the presence that is before me. And then it liberates all these other levels, you see, that everyone's talking about. This is the key to liberation, rather than the flow into suffering. And if at any point we stop along the way, we can, because we need to rest sometimes. Sometimes the process is too intense for us, and we just need to rest in our breath, or we just need to rest in the felt sensation that I am here, and that sensation is resting in the body. So sometimes we just need to stop there to rest. But if our intention is liberation, freedom, which is our already prior condition, we can't stop at the sensation associated with the body. We have to ask, who or what is experiencing or expressing as the body?
Yeah, I just sometimes have a hard time. Probably everybody does. But me is just so ever present, you know. Me is always there. And it's easy to get lost in that. And not even realize that you're lost in that.
Yeah, until you do. But understand that the reason you get lost in it until you do, the reason I say that, until you recognize that you are lost in it, that's the indicator that you're already prior awake. Because each and every one of you, no matter whether it lasts for a minute, an hour, a day, a week, a year, or 2 years, every single one of you will come back to the recognition that you're not whatever you're caught in. And you'll ask the question again, or you'll begin the process again of how do you come back to this ever aware presence. You see, that the presence which you are, consciousness, awareness itself, is ever present. And you know this intuitively.
Mhm.
That's why you're engaged in this process. It's not you that's returning or creating or establishing yourself somewhere new. It's a deep knowing. It's your own internal wisdom that's telling you, yeah, but if you just turn away from what you're now identified with and go back in this direction, follow the energy back to the source in thought, through the question, who am I? What is aware? Keep following that back. This impulse is not coming from you, from the identified me. This is coming from the established, liberated recognition of your own being. You are always calling you home. It's not somewhere else or something else or someone else that's doing that. At this stage, if you can say, at this stage, you come back here week after week because I will just keep saying to you, don't go in that direction. That's the way of suffering. Come back in this direction. Yeah? Move away from that identification. Come back here. But eventually, you'll understand that that's your own voice. It's your own wisdom. You have enough wisdom right now to keep coming back here. Right? And some of you, I know you are starting to notice that that voice is cropping up more and more often in between the times that you're here in satsang. Right? So this is becoming the awareness of your own wisdom, and it's starting to crop up for you more and more often, even when you slip away. So if your body is your anchor, fine, use that, but use it only momentarily, just long enough to come back to the body, which brings you into present moment recognition of I am here, and then ask the question, what's before this? Just keep doing the steps.
Okay, thank you.
And I found it helpful for what you shared with us a few weeks ago, just to say, remember, I exist, and then I am awareness. When so caught up. I'll keep that.
I can remember now that the reason why I'm not feeling those feelings now is at some point I started asking myself, what am I? It takes me a while to go in the past and remember exactly what happened.
Yeah.
remarkable animals already know that they exist, and that's why they're happy all the time. I mean, especially a dog. A dog just seems to be always wagging its tail with its heart and just happy. Just, I exist, I'm happy, you know? That's how it seems like dogs are.
So yeah, there's no doubt that other beings, other creatures are conscious in some way. And often much more in the moment than we are. But what they don't possess is the capacity that you have for self-reflection, which is the way that in which you can come to the understanding of how you suffer, the way you suffer, the conditioning under which you suffer, the ways in which your false beliefs cause you to suffer. You can reflect on those things, you can contemplate them, and you can free yourself from them. This is your opportunity.
I feel like I'm going backwards with these questions, but that's what's up for me, so. But as I'm sitting here, I'm recognizing that I am awareness. I'm also recognizing, as she said earlier, it does feel meaningless. It feels meaningless, boring, like nothing. It doesn't feel like bliss. I can't say that I am bliss. It doesn't feel blissful.
What is saying this? Is awareness saying this? Is that which is aware saying this, or is mind saying this?
I guess awareness is noticing it.
Exactly. And the difficulty arises when that which is being noticed is identified with, rather than that which is notifying or noticing. Right? Something is noticing. Right? Again, we come back to it's very, very straightforward and very simple. If you're going to, as we all do, if there's a process of identification which happens, right, through living, we develop this capacity to identify with various things that happen in our experience or in our thoughts. So we know that this is a natural characteristic of everyone who's embodied. Right? So the opportunity we have is to identify with what's aware, not with what it is aware of. And this is something that can be easily pointed to conceptually and also be very difficult to do moment to moment. Until the momentum of conditioning is broken through this process of pulling attention away from the objects, that which we're identifying with, right, and putting it on that which is aware. And just continuing to do that and to stand as that which is aware as often as possible for as long as possible, until all of these other forms of identification dissolve of their own. They just starve, literally, because attention is their food. Right? So as soon as we come into this place where we simply say, I am aware, and it's a true and genuine experience of I am that which is aware, the immediate response of the mind is to say, yeah, but, what about, and then go through the dialogue which you presented, right? Just to immediately go back and say, yeah, but I'm just going to be here bored, I don't want this. That's not you in your essential nature as awareness or consciousness. That is mind. Mind is saying, I don't want to be here, I'm bored, this is difficult, I don't like being nothing.
I'm afraid, so what happens if there's laughter around? Are you just supposed to just be aware of laughter, or can you participate in it?
So it's really, really important that you understand that what we're talking about is the investigation of phenomenon. We're not talking about establishing rigid rules about how to live your life. You live your life as it happens spontaneously. But it is also a characteristic of this opportunity which says I am not a dog, I am a person, and I have this ability to reflect, to be able to challenge the conditioning in the mind. Right? So we're not talking about what we should or shouldn't do. Some of the wildest and craziest people I've ever met are people that I met in India who were considered to be, and I consider to be, liberated beings, who were just dancing in all the chaos of life full-throatedly in so many different ways. That just doesn't happen to be this particular manifestation. I find as time goes on, I just get quieter and quieter. So remember from the reading that Sri Ramana mentions in there at the end, he says, some, knowing their own nature, will become more and more abstracted within that nature, meaning more and more attuned inwardly to that nature, and others will not. Others will live full-throatedly in the midst of life, in the midst of daily activity. So the way that a particular master manifests, or the way that a particular master liberates, has nothing to do with how she acts on the outside. It only has to do with what the experience is on the inside, whether there's identification with the body-mind or not. This is liberation. This has nothing to do with the way in which you laugh or you express. One of the things that always very much impressed me was one of my teachers, and I can't remember at the moment which one, said, as you become more and more awake and more attuned to your true nature, you don't become something other than who you are, you become more of who you are. Meaning that the personality is liberated, right? So there's a liberation from the attachment to personality, from identification with it. But the personality can become stronger. There's just no identification. And you can meet people, you may have, since you spent a long time in India, you can meet people who have very, very strong and forceful personalities that a lot of people think and attend to as the recognition that this is a liberated being. And others are just so quiet and so retiring that you can hardly find them. You can hear about them and you can go in search of them, but they're always ducking behind bushes because that's just the nature of their personality. It's always been that way for them. And others are just full-blown, living in the midst of everyday experience. It's not about what you demonstrate in terms of your personality. It's about not being identified with what's happening in the world, in the thought identified only with what's aware. And some people, realizing the nature of who they are, immediately explode into a bliss bomb, and that gets noticed by a whole bunch of people around them. For others, there's just a very quiet and serene happiness that's undisturbed, that doesn't get noticed by anyone. It's not about how you act. This is the foundation of the teaching in Advaita that says that one of the preliminary practices you can use is to let yourself act however you act, behave however you behave, and keep reminding yourself, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. This thought comes, I'm not this. This action comes, I am not this. This mistake or error or confusion comes, I am not this. This is a significant preliminary practice. Why? Because it keeps us from engaging and saying, well, I don't know anything about who I am, so I'll just stick with being the sensation that I have as a body. Right? So if you want to move beyond that into the deeper understanding of who you are, beyond personality, body, mind, and world, then whatever rises and says, I don't understand what you're talking about, but I can identify with this meanness as the sensation in the body. The practice is, I am not that. You are not that. Not to deny anything, just to enable you for the avail you of the opportunity to go deeper, to understanding what is before the object me. So join with me if you feel to. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityur Mukshi Amamritawa Swaha Bhuva Bhu Om Sat Jung Ham Om. Namaste.
Thank you.